in the far edge of human-colonized space, where rusted outposts cling to life on lonely asteroids, Jace Maddox was known as just a mechanic, a stubborn, quiet man with oil-stained hands who could fix anything made of metal and wires. Tonight, the stars outside his hangar were calm, and his old radio hummed an old Earth tune as he welded a cracked plasma coil for a mining skiff. Then the ground trembled. At first, he thought it was a supply shuttle landing rough, but when the quake grew stronger, enough to rattle tools off the workbench, Jay stepped outside into the thin, biting wind. Above him, blotting out the scattered moons, loomed a shadow bigger than any ship he'd ever serviced. Wings, wide and trembling, beat the ground into submission as claws the size of shuttles dug into the landing strip. It was no ship. It was alive. The villagers had whispered about them, starfire dragons, living plasma furnaces that drifted between moons older than human memory. Legends, nightmares, and yet here it was, staring at a lone human mechanic with eyes that burned like coals. Clutched against her massive chest, half hidden by torn, flickering wings, was something smaller, a limp hatchling, scales dim, tiny claws twitching in pain. The mother dragon lowered her head, so close Jay smelled the scorched metal of her breath. Her throat vibrated with a sound like grinding rock. Then, with surprising care, she scraped a claw across the dusty hangar floor. Sparks flew as she carved deep, desperate symbols. Awkward, shaky, but painfully clear. Help. Child dying. Jace's mind spun. He'd never patched up a living being, let alone an alien life form made of bone, scale, and something akin to living plasma. Fear clawed at him. What if I make it worse? What if she kills me when I fail? But then, he looked at the hatchling's flickering eyes. Even in a galaxy filled with wonders and horrors, some things were universal. A mother's terror, a child's shallow breath, the helpless weight of time slipping away. Jace dropped his welding torch and spread his hands slowly. "Okay, big girl," he murmured, his voice trembling as much as hers did. "I'm not a vet, but I fix broken things. Let's see what we can do." He gestured to his hangar, cluttered with drones, scrap parts, coolant tanks, and old fusion cells. Not a hospital, but maybe enough to make a miracle. The mother dragon, massive shadow under the cold stars, gently laid her baby on a metal work table that groaned under the unexpected weight. Under the bright work lights, Jace saw the truth. Shards of asteroid rock and scorched metal were lodged deep in the hatchling's soft belly scales. Infection oozed around the wounds. Plasma flickered weakly from its tiny throat vents, sputtering like a dying engine. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of grease across his cheek. "All right, kid," he whispered to the little dragon, voice steady even as his hands trembled. "I fix rust buckets for a living, but tonight you're my ship, and ships don't die on my watch." Behind him, the mother dragon loomed, her breath rattling the walls each time the hatchling whimpered. She could crush him in a heartbeat. Yet in her eyes, Jay saw something he'd never seen in any machine. Hope. He grabbed his toolkit, old med supplies, and a battered emergency plasma cutter. He'd never stitched scales, never mended living plasma sacks. But as every mechanic knows, you don't back down from a repair, no matter how impossible. Outside, the night grew cold and silent. Inside, under the mechanics' lights, humanity's stubbornness sparked into life. And somewhere deep in that dying hatchling's chest, a flicker answered back. Tonight, the galaxy would remember what humans do best. They fix what others abandon. For hours, the old hangar became an operating room, unlike any in human history. Jace Maddox, with trembling hands and tools meant for rusted engines, worked beneath the blazing heat of floodlights that cast giant dragon shadows against the walls. Outside, word spread like wildfire through the lonely outpost. A starfire dragon had landed among humans. Panic and awe collided in every comm signal crackling through the dusty speakers. People demanded Jace abandon the creature. Too dangerous. Call the fleet. Run. But he tuned them out, his world shrinking to the cold metal table and the broken young life before him. He disinfected jagged wounds with ship-grade coolant, the only thing cold enough to tame the hatchling's internal heat without causing tissue shock. Each piece of shrapnel he tweezed out sizzled against the tray like molten glass. Sometimes the mother dragon's tail smashed the hangar wall in frustration or fear when her baby whimpered. But when she'd catch Jace's eye, she'd still. Trust. A bond wordless but stronger than any treaty. Inside the hatchling, he found things that made no sense to human medicine. Delicate filaments that sparked tiny arcs, plasma sacs that pulsed like twin hearts, and a system of scale plates layered over sensitive veins of glowing tissue. One wrong cut could fry him alive, or stop the baby's core heat forever. His hands blistered from the heat radiating through the gloves. His old med kit alarm shrieked every minute, warning him this wasn't standard biology. He shut them off. Machines don't know heart. Mechanics do. When exhaustion blurred his vision, he remembered how his father had taught him to fix a mining hauler's coolant manifold with nothing but duct tape and stubbornness. He whispered to the hatchling like it was that old hauler. "Stay with me. Hold on. I know your guts don't match my books, but I'll figure you out piece by piece." At dawn, a local science team banged at the hangar doors, shouting that only trained xenobiologists could handle this. Jace didn't unlock the door. He didn't care about their credentials or degrees. They hadn't been there when the mother begged with bleeding claws. He welded tiny filaments with a micro-laser, reinforced cracked plasma sacs with a layer of biopolymer scavenged from a drone's heat shielding. Improvised? Yes. Stupid? Maybe. But it worked. The baby's chest rose smoother. The gurgling hum of flickering plasma turned into a soft, steady thrum. Outside, armored soldiers arrived, ordered to contain the dragon threat. They crept closer, rifles ready. Inside, Jace crouched low, running a hand over the hatchling's warm scales. "You're almost there, kid," he murmured, too tired to stand up straight. "You and me, we're going to prove to this galaxy that humans don't run from broken things." Suddenly, the mother dragon turned her head to the approaching soldiers and hissed, a sound like a volcanic vent about to erupt. Her wings spread wide, shielding the hangar doors, daring anyone to come closer to her healer and her child. And there, beneath the trembling steel roof, a simple human mechanic, finished stitching miracles with grease-stained hands, watched over by a creature of fire and legend who'd chosen to trust a mortal when her whole race would have scorched him from existence. Jace didn't know yet that outside, cameras were recording, and far-off alien eyes were already calling him a myth. To him, there was just a young life he refused to let die, and a promise made with every drop of sweat. "I fix what others abandon, even dragons." Jace Maddox hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. His hands were raw, the backs blistered from heat exposure, but he didn't care. Every hiss of the hatchling's breathing, every flicker of its plasma sacs, was a new problem to solve. And humans, he reminded himself, were at their best when cornered by the impossible. Outside, the local security commander barked demands through a bullhorn. "Step away from the creature. This is a threat to human safety." But inside the hangar, Jace barely heard them. He only heard the gentle hum of improvised life support, a jumble of ship filters, duct tape, and coolant lines keeping a tiny alien dragon alive. The mother dragon had not left her vigil. Sometimes, in her exhaustion, she dozed, her huge horned head resting against the hangar's metal walls like a living mountain. Other times, she watched Jace so intently that he wondered if she could see inside his mind, sense every fear. Every moment he doubted himself. But every time the hatchling twitched and let out a tiny squeak, she would rumble with relief and nudge Jace's shoulder, careful not to break him. At one point, the baby's breathing sputtered, then stopped altogether. Jace's heart clenched. He slammed a fist on the table to keep himself from freezing. Machines fail. Systems stall. You restart them. He grabbed a battered power cell, clipped cables to what he guessed was a neural node near the plasma sacs, and prayed he wasn't about to fry the poor thing's brain. A quick pulse. A spark. The baby jerked once, then exhaled a trembling plume of harmless blue flame that danced across the ceiling beams. Jace laughed, half in shock, half in sheer exhausted joy. He turned and found the mother dragon's giant eye only inches away, an ancient galaxy killer holding her breath for the same reason a human mechanic did: hope. By now, the outpost was in uproar. Soldiers debated whether to storm the hangar, but the dragon's tail coiled tight around the entry, her wings stretched wide, blocking every door. Rumors raced through human comm channels. A mechanic made a starfire dragon submit? No. He saved her child. Impossible. No one cared that Jace was just a grease monkey with a worn jumpsuit and debt collectors back on Earth. Here, to a creature worshipped and feared by entire alien clans, he was something more: healer, protector, maybe even kin. As he cleaned the last wound and checked the new, stable glow pulsing in the hatchling's chest, Jace felt something shift inside him. He'd spent his life patching broken freighters so mining bosses could squeeze another payday from tired laborers. Now he realized metal was easy. Flesh, hope, life, that was real engineering. That was worth bleeding for. The baby, sensing warmth again, tried to stand on shaky claws. It chirped, a crackling baby roar that made the mother's eyes overflow with tears like molten glass. She bent her massive head low, her scales brushing Jace's chest so softly it felt like a whispered thank you. In that moment, Jace Maddox, certified mechanic, unpaid bill dodger, but the last man you trust with a scalpel, became a legend. Cameras hidden among the troops streamed this image to half the galaxy. A lone human, soot-smudged and bone-tired, resting his hand on the snout of a living starfire. People would later argue about that moment. Was it an accident of desperation, a human's reckless courage, or proof that somewhere deep in human bones lies an unspoken promise? We fix what others fear. We mend what even dragons cannot. Outside, alien envoys and human commanders waited, too afraid to intervene but too awed to turn away. Inside, under flickering hangar lights, a bond older than treaties or weapons was forged, not with force but with a mechanic's unwavering hands and a mother's desperate faith. The hatchling's eyes glowed bright now, brighter than any work light in Jace Maddox's hangar. Its tiny plasma vents pulsed steady, clear of infection, scales healing where shrapnel had torn them apart. It leaned its head into Jace's grease-smudged palm, humming a soft note that vibrated up his arm and lodged warm in his chest. Outside, soldiers and scientists finally braved the dragon's defensive circle. They came armed with scanners, translators, even sedatives in case the mother turned violent. But when they stepped inside the battered hangar and saw the baby upright, saw a filthy human whispering to it as though he'd done nothing more dramatic than fix a leaky fuel line, every plan they had died on their tongues. The mother dragon uncurled from the door with the slow, regal grace of a queen who knew no one would dare harm her child now. She nudged her hatchling forward, encouraging its trembling steps toward the mechanic who had traded sleep, blood, and sanity for this single impossible victory. A xenobiologist, voice shaken, asked Jace for a tissue sample. He ignored her. Another officer barked that command needed to secure the creatures for safety. Jace just shook his head, his voice raw. "Look at her. She doesn't belong to you. Or me. She trusted me when she didn't have to. Let him go." The mother seemed to understand. She bent low enough that her molten eyes met Jace's exhausted ones. She exhaled a plume of warm, harmless vapor over his chest, a gesture older than human language, older than any alliance, a blessing. Behind him, cameras buzzed, capturing every moment for the feeds that had already gone viral. Throughout human space, people who once called dragons monsters now replayed the image. A mortal mechanic standing unfazed under the breath of an ancient apex predator, wiping oil from his forehead as if this was just another Tuesday night repair job. The mother dragon gently lifted her baby onto her back, spreading her vast wings until they blocked out the dawn sun spilling over the colony rim. She paused, massive, magnificent, and leaned so close that Jace felt her scales graze his cheek. A final, silent thank you. Then, with a beat that rattled the hangar's bolts loose, she launched skyward, a living star soaring higher and higher, her child's tiny roar echoing back to the mechanic who refused to give up. The soldiers lowered their weapons. The scientists stared at data screens suddenly worthless, and Jace Maddox, with every bone aching, every nerve sparking with fatigue, just watched the sky until the last glimmer of wings faded among the stars. Word of what happened spread faster than any fleet could fly. They called him the Dragon Mechanic. They called him the healer of Starfire. Some called him a fool who risked everything for a creature that might have devoured him in a heartbeat. But most called him something else, proof that humans were the ones you turned to when the universe itself said, impossible. Back inside the hangar, amid scattered tools and melted metal, Jay sat cross-legged beside his workbench. He laughed, half delirious, half triumphant. Maybe tomorrow he'd sleep. Maybe next week he'd fix the old mining skiff still waiting for a new coil. But tonight, he'd done more than any human mechanic ever dreamed. He'd mended life itself. Outside, kids would point to the sky and swear they saw dragons dancing in the ion storms above the asteroid fields. They'd say the dragons remember, and somewhere beyond those blinking stars, a mother and her child carried that truth with them. Humans fix what others abandon, even the impossible, even draggable.